The paper was laminated. That's the first thing I noticed. Not the words, not the tone, just the plastic shine of it catching the afternoon light as she held it out to me. I remember standing there on their front porch, holding a small brown gift bag with a teddy bear inside, the kind you find at a drugstore. Nothing fancy, just soft, tan fur and a little blue ribbon. My grandson, Oliver, had turned 7 the week before. I hadn't been invited to the party, but I figured a grandfather could still stop by with a gift. The door had barely opened when she stepped outside and closed it behind her. Emily, my daughter-in-law. She didn't look angry. Not exactly. Calm, actually. Too calm. And then she handed me the sheet. I thought it would be easier if everything was written down, she said. I looked at the paper. At the top, in bold letters, it said, Visitation Guidelines. That word alone made something in my stomach tighten. Guidelines. Below it were bullet points. Saturdays only. 2-hour maximum visit. No unapproved gifts. No unscheduled contact. I remember blinking a few times, like maybe I was misunderstanding. Like maybe this was some weird joke. Emily, what is this? She folded her arms. This is just to keep things healthy and structured for Oliver. Healthy. Structured. The words sounded like they came from a parenting podcast. Behind her, I could hear the television inside the house. Some cartoon. Probably the one Oliver liked with the talking trains. He was home, 10 feet away from me, but the door stayed closed. I glanced down at the bag in my hand. The teddy bear okay? I asked quietly. She didn't even look at it. That would count as an unapproved gift. For a second I honestly thought she was kidding, but her face didn't change. Then she added something else. Something I still remember word for word. If you want consistent access to Oliver, she said, there will also be a monthly family support contribution. I frowned. I'm sorry, what? She said it like she was discussing a cable bill. $800 a month. The porch went quiet. No birds. No wind. Just that muffled cartoon voice inside the house. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but none came. If you're involved in Oliver's life, she continued calmly, you should be contributing to the household that raises him. My mouth opened a little, then closed again. I looked back down at the laminated paper. $800. For my own grandson. For a moment I imagined pushing past her and walking into the house, just calling out Oliver's name. But I didn't. I just stood there holding that little teddy bear bag like an idiot. Those are the rules, Emily said. Rules. Not a request. Not a conversation. Rules. And the strange thing is, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even ask to see Oliver. I simply nodded once, folded the paper, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. All right, I said. Emily looked almost surprised by that. Then she stepped back inside and closed the door. I stood on that porch for another 10 seconds, listening to the TV through the wall. Then I walked back to my truck. I sat there with the teddy bear on the passenger seat, and I remember thinking one quiet thought. All right, if that's how we're doing things. Because what Emily didn't know, what my son didn't know either, was that I had already made a decision. And a few weeks later, I handed my son an envelope. The moment he opened it, his face went completely white. I drove home that afternoon with the teddy bear still sitting in the passenger seat. It stayed there the whole way. About 40 minutes. I lived just outside a small town in upstate New York. Quiet roads, a couple gas stations, one grocery store that somehow never has the right brand of anything. The kind of place where people still wave when they pass each other on the road. The sky was gray that day. Early fall. Leaves just starting to turn. I remember the windshield wipers squeaking every few seconds from a light drizzle, and that bag sliding a little every time I took a corner. I didn't open it again. Didn't take the bear out. Just drove. I should probably explain something about myself. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm 52 years old. I spent most of my life working maintenance for a public school district. Nothing glamorous. Fixing boilers, patching drywall, replacing broken lockers. That sort of thing. I retired early 2 years ago after a back injury that never quite healed right. It wasn't a bad life, though. Simple, steady. My wife, Carol, passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Fast and unfair like it usually is. After she was gone, the house got very quiet. Too quiet sometimes. That's when Oliver started becoming the center of my world. My grandson. Little blonde hair. Big curious eyes. Always asking questions about everything. Grandpa, why do squirrels flick their tails? Grandpa, how do clouds stay up? Stuff like that. When he was younger, my son and Emily used to drop him off at my place on Saturdays. Sometimes overnight. We had our routines. Pancakes in the morning, a walk to the park down the road, and every once in a while we'd stop by Miller's Hardware, where the owner kept a jar of those old-fashioned root beer candies by the register. Oliver thought that place was magical. I still remember the first time he helped me plant tomatoes in the backyard. He dug holes way too big and got dirt all over his shirt. Emily wasn't thrilled about that part. She always preferred things organized, clean, structured, even back then, but it never caused real problems. At least not at first. My son, Jason, always played the middle. He's 32 now. Works in IT for some insurance company in Albany. Good kid. Quiet like me. Avoids conflict whenever possible. I guess that's where he and I are alike. Looking back, I can see when things started shifting. Little changes. Small comments. Emily started scheduling Oliver's weekends more tightly. Soccer practice. Coding club. Piano lessons. Things that slowly replaced our Saturdays. Jason would call and say something like, "Hey Dad, we're gonna skip this weekend. Oliver's got a tournament." Or, "Emily signed him up for something new, so maybe next week." At first I didn't think much of it. Kids get busy. Life changes. But over time the visits got shorter. Less frequent. Then they stopped completely for a while. That's when I started bringing small things by their house. A puzzle. A book. That teddy bear. Just an excuse to stop in and see him for 5 minutes. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes Emily would say Oliver was busy, or tired, or already asleep, even when the sun was still up. Jason rarely came to the door anymore. Usually it was just her. And that afternoon on the porch, when she handed me that laminated list, something finally clicked. Because that wasn't just about scheduling or structure. That was control. And the strangest part? It didn't feel like a sudden decision. It felt planned. Like those rules had been sitting in her mind for a long time. I remember getting home that day, sitting at my kitchen table, and laying that laminated paper flat on the wood. I read it 3 times, each line slower than the last. Then I noticed something near the bottom I hadn't fully registered on the porch. A final bullet point. Smaller text, but very clear. Violation of these guidelines may result in termination of visitation privileges. Privileges. Not family. Privileges. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't really about Oliver. Not entirely. It was about something else. Something Emily wanted. And I had a feeling. I already knew what it was. That laminated sheet sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. I didn't throw it away. Didn't crumple it up. Just left it there, right next to the fruit bowl where Carol used to keep bananas that always turned brown too fast. Every time I walked past it, I'd glance down. Saturdays only. 2 hours. No unapproved gifts. $800 family support contribution. The wording bothered me more the longer I looked at it. It wasn't written like something you say to family. It sounded contractual, like something from a rental agreement. On the second night, I called Jason. I didn't plan to. The phone was just sitting there on the counter while I was making a sandwich. I stared at it for a while before dialing. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Dad." His voice sounded normal. Too normal. "Hey," I said. "Got a minute?" "Yeah, sure." There was a pause. The kind where both people know something is coming. "So, Emily gave me a piece of paper the other day." Another pause. This one longer. "Oh," he said quietly. "Just that." "Oh." No confusion. "No, what paper?" "Just oh." That told me a lot. "You knew about it," I said. Jason exhaled slowly. "Dad, we talked about it." "We." That word sat there between us. "I see. She just wants things to be more structured with Oliver," he continued. "You know how things can get chaotic." Chaotic. I almost laughed. "Jason," I said, "I brought the kid a teddy bear." "I know. And apparently I now need approval to do that." "She's just trying to set boundaries." "Boundaries? Another one of those therapy words. I also noticed the $800. Silence. Then he cleared his throat. That part is more about helping out. With what? Just household expenses. I leaned back in my kitchen chair. The refrigerator hummed behind me. Outside, a pickup truck drove past slowly on the road. So let me get this straight, I said calmly. If I want to see my grandson regularly, I start paying rent? It's not rent. It's $800. It's contributing. I rubbed my forehead. Jason, did this come from you? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. It was Emily's idea, he admitted. Of course it was. I didn't think you'd take it like this. How exactly did you think I'd take it? Another pause. She feels like you undermine her sometimes. That one surprised me. Undermine her how? Well, the candy at the hardware store, the dirt in the garden, stuff like that. I actually smiled a little. So being a grandpa, it's not that simple. I let the silence stretch. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the porch. Jason, when was the last time Oliver asked about me? The line stayed quiet for several seconds. Finally he said, softly, he asks. That answer felt rehearsed, not honest. We ended the call a few minutes later without really resolving anything. But after I hung up, something strange happened. Instead of feeling angry, I felt very calm. Calmer than I expected. Because that phone call confirmed something important. Emily hadn't just made a rule sheet. Jason had agreed to it. Maybe reluctantly. But he had still agreed. Which meant this wasn't just Emily trying to control things. This was the new system. And in that system, my relationship with my grandson had a monthly fee attached to it. I sat there at the kitchen table for a long time, the clock on the wall ticking louder than usual. Eventually, I picked up the laminated sheet again. I read every word slowly. Then I flipped it over. Blank. Smooth plastic. Easy to wipe clean. I remember thinking, if this is going to be treated like a contract, then maybe it deserves a response like one. So I got up, walked to the small desk in my living room, opened the drawer where I keep my checkbook and a stack of envelopes. And that's where the idea started forming. Not out of anger, not revenge, just clarity. Over the next few weeks, I didn't call Jason again. I didn't stop by the house. I didn't argue with anyone. Instead, I prepared something very simple. One envelope, one conversation. And when the time came, I handed it to my son. What happened after he opened it? That's the part nobody expected. For the next few weeks, I followed Emily's rules. Exactly. No surprise visits. No gifts. No calls to Oliver. Just Saturdays. 2 hours. The first Saturday felt strange. I pulled into their driveway a few minutes early and just sat there in my truck, the engine ticking as it cooled. The house looked the same as always. Blue siding, basketball hoop over the garage, Oliver's bike lying on the lawn. For a moment I almost drove away. But at exactly noon, I walked up and knocked. Emily opened the door. She glanced at her watch. Right on time. Like I was a repairman showing up for a scheduled job. Oliver ran into the hallway behind her when he heard my voice. Grandpa, that part still worked. He hugged me so hard he almost knocked my hat off. Emily stepped aside and said, You have until 2. Just like that. A timer had started. The visit itself wasn't bad. Oliver showed me a Lego spaceship he'd built. We sat on the living room floor for a while. The TV was on low in the background playing some cartoon I didn't recognize. But the whole time, Emily was nearby, in the kitchen, at the dining table with her laptop, always within earshot. Every time Oliver laughed too loudly or got a little messy with the Legos, she'd glance over, not angry, just monitoring. And when 2 o'clock came, she didn't say a word. She just stood up from the table and looked at the clock. Oliver noticed. Already. Grandpa has to go, she said calmly. Just like that. And that's how the next few Saturdays went. Exactly 2 hours. Not a minute more. I never brought gifts again. But I noticed something else during those visits. Something small at first. The house was different. Little things. New living room furniture. A bigger TV. A new SUV parked in the driveway by the 3rd weekend. It didn't quite match the story about needing help with household expenses. One afternoon, while Oliver was showing me a video game in his room, I overheard Emily talking on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice carried down the hallway. "Yeah, once we finish the kitchen remodel, we'll probably refinance." Remodel. I hadn't noticed the kitchen yet, but when I walked past it later, I saw the boxes. New appliances still wrapped in plastic. That night when I got home, I sat at my computer and looked up something I hadn't thought about in years. Grandparent visitation laws. New York State. Turns out grandparents actually do have certain rights. Not automatic ones, but legal options. Especially if a parent restricts access without good reason. I spent 3 hours reading court cases, articles, legal forums. I even found a number for a family law office in Albany. The next morning, I called them. The receptionist scheduled a consultation for later that week. I almost canceled it twice. I've never been the kind of guy who runs to lawyers. But when Thursday afternoon came, I drove there anyway. The lawyer's name was Michael Grant. Mid-40s. Calm voice. The kind of guy who listens more than he talks. I laid the laminated sheet on his desk. He read it slowly, then leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said, "that's unusually direct." I told him everything. The porch, the $800, the limited visits. He nodded quietly through most of it. Finally, he asked one question. "Mr. Mercer, what do you want from this situation?" That took me a minute to answer. I stared at the paper again. Then I said the simplest truth I had. "I want to see my grandson without paying a subscription fee." Michael gave a small smile at that. "Fair enough." He tapped the laminated sheet with his finger. "You realize this document might actually help you." "How?" "Because it looks less like parenting boundaries and more like financial coercion." That phrase stuck with me. Financial coercion. Then he said something I hadn't expected. If they're demanding money in exchange for visitation, that changes the legal picture quite a bit. I felt something shift in my chest when he said that. Not anger, not satisfaction, just certainty. Before I left, Michael handed me a folder. Inside it were a few printed documents and one letter. He told me I didn't have to use it, but if I wanted to, it would make my position very clear. I drove home slowly that evening. The sun was setting over the trees, and that's when I bought the envelope. Plain white, nothing special. I waited 2 more weeks before using it, because timing matters, and when the moment finally came, I handed it to Jason, right there in his own living room, and the second he read what was inside, his face lost all color. 2 weeks can be a long time when you're waiting to make a decision, or when you've already made it, and you're just waiting for the right moment to act. During those 2 weeks, I kept doing exactly what the laminated sheet said. Saturdays, no gifts. 2 hours. Emily stayed polite, controlled, almost professional about it. Jason was usually around somewhere in the house, but rarely joined us for long. He'd pop into the living room, ask Oliver about school, then drift back to his office or the garage. It felt less like visiting family and more like checking in at a supervised facility. But Oliver didn't seem to notice the tension. Kids rarely do. To him, Grandpa was still Grandpa. We built Lego towers. We watched half a cartoon episode before the clock ran out. One Saturday he asked, "Why don't you come over more?" I told him the truth, just not the whole truth. "Schedules are funny sometimes, buddy." He nodded like that made sense. Kids accept a lot of things adults complicate. That same afternoon, after my 2 hours were up, I drove to Albany again, back to Michael Grant's office. He had the paperwork ready. We went through it line by line. Nothing dramatic. Just legal language. Clear. Direct. It explained that a demand for money in exchange for visitation with a grandchild could be considered coercive behavior in family court. It also stated that if access continued to be restricted, we would formally petition the court for grandparent visitation rights. Michael looked at me across the desk. "You don't have to deliver this," he said. "Sometimes just the conversation is enough." I thought about that, about calling Jason, about trying to reason things out again, but I remembered that phone call from weeks earlier. The pauses, the excuses, the way he had already accepted Emily's rules. "No," I said quietly. "I'll give it to him." Michael slid the papers into a simple white envelope. No logos, No dramatic red stamps. Just paper. You should probably hand it to your son directly, he suggested. Not your daughter-in-law. That part made sense. So I waited. The right moment came the following Saturday. My 2 hours with Oliver ended the same way as usual. Emily stood up from the kitchen chair. 2 o'clock. Time. Oliver hugged me goodbye. See you next week, Grandpa. Of course, I said. But instead of heading straight for the door, I turned to Jason. Got a minute? Emily's eyes flicked up from the table immediately. Jason hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, sure. We stepped into the living room, while Oliver went back to his game. I could hear the electronic beeps from the hallway. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the envelope. Something for you, I said. Jason looked confused. What's this? Just read it. Emily stood up from the dining table. Jason, we're actually about to. He held up a hand. It's fine. Then he opened the envelope. The room got very quiet. You could hear Oliver's game sounds from down the hall. Little digital explosions. Jason unfolded the letter. His eyes moved slowly across the page. Halfway through reading, his expression changed. His shoulders stiffened. He read the rest. Then he looked up at me, and I watched the color drain from his face. What is this? He asked. His voice had dropped. Emily walked over quickly. What's going on? Jason handed her the letter without speaking. She started reading. The calm expression she usually carried disappeared within seconds. This is ridiculous, she said sharply. But I didn't raise my voice. Didn't step closer. I just stood there, hands in my jacket pockets, and said the simplest thing I could. I'm not paying to see my grandson. Jason looked between me and the letter again. You are threatening us with a lawyer? I'm informing you of my options. Emily laughed once. A tight, angry sound. You think a court is going to side with you? I shrugged slightly. Michael Grant seems to think it might. That name made Jason look back down at the letter. He read the law firm header again. The room felt different now. No laminated rules. No quiet supervision. Just 3 adults standing in a living room, realizing the situation had changed. Jason looked at me again, and this time he didn't look calm. He looked scared. For a few seconds after Jason finished reading the letter, nobody spoke. The house suddenly felt smaller. Oliver's video game sounds drifted down the hallway. Little electronic pops and music. Completely normal. Completely unaware. Emily folded the letter once, then again, like she was trying to compress the whole situation into something smaller. This is unbelievable, she said. Her voice wasn't calm anymore. Jason rubbed his face with one hand. Dad, why would you do this? I kept my voice even. I didn't start this. Emily scoffed. You're seriously trying to play the victim here. I didn't respond to that right away. Instead, I nodded toward the dining table behind her. The laminated rule sheet. That was your idea, right? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Jason looked between us again. Dad, nobody said you had to pay that money. I raised an eyebrow. Emily did. On the porch. That wasn't meant like that. Then how was it meant? He didn't have a quick answer. Emily stepped forward. It was meant as support, she said. You're part of this family, Daniel. Families contribute. I already did, I said quietly. Both of them paused. For 32 years, I added. That hung in the air a moment. Jason looked down at the carpet. Emily crossed her arms. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm responding. I could see Jason trying to process everything. The letter, the legal language, the fact that this wasn't just an argument anymore. It was documentation. Emily unfolded the letter again and pointed to one paragraph. You're accusing us of financial coercion. I'm saying that's what a court might call it. Her jaw tightened. You think threatening us with lawyers is going to help your relationship with Oliver? That question actually made me pause, because the truth was, it might not. But I also knew something else. This system they'd created wasn't a relationship either. It was access control. I tried talking first, I said. Jason shifted uncomfortably. He knew that was true. The phone call. The pauses. The excuses. Emily turned to him suddenly. Jason, you can't seriously be considering this. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at me. Then at the hallway, where Oliver's room was. Then back at the letter. Finally, he said quietly, Emily, maybe the money part was a mistake. Her head snapped toward him. A mistake. It looks bad, he said. It is bad. Her voice rose slightly now. We're the parents, Jason. We decide who sees our son. That's not always how the law works, I said gently. She glared at me. You've been planning this for weeks, haven't you? Yes. That answer seemed to catch her off guard. Jason sat down on the edge of the couch, like his legs suddenly needed a break. Dad, are you actually going to take us to court? I shook my head slowly. Not if I don't have to. Emily laughed again, but there was less confidence in it now. So, what exactly do you want? That was the moment everything finally simplified. All the rules, all the tension, all the legal language. It came down to something very small. I want to be Oliver's grandfather, I said. No timers. No payment plans. No permission slips for teddy bears. The room stayed quiet. Jason stared at the floor. Emily stared at me. And then something unexpected happened. From the hallway, Oliver's voice called out, Dad. We all turned. He was standing there holding his game controller, looking confused. Grandpa, are you leaving already? Jason looked at the clock on the wall. 2:15. 15 minutes past the usual limit. For the first time in weeks, nobody had said anything about it. Emily looked at the clock too. Then at Jason. Then at the letter in her hand. Something in her posture shifted. Just slightly. Jason stood up slowly, walked over to Oliver, put a hand on his shoulder. Then he looked back at me and said something I honestly hadn't expected. Dad, stay for dinner. Emily didn't speak, but she also didn't stop him. And in that quiet moment, the rules finally cracked. Dinner that night was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, just careful. Like everyone at the table was choosing their words a little more slowly than usual. Emily made spaghetti. I could hear the pots clinking in the kitchen while Oliver and I sat at the dining table building something out of his Legos. Some kind of robot he insisted could also be a submarine. Jason hovered around the counter, pretending to help. Every now and then our eyes would meet. Neither of us said anything about the envelope. Not yet. Oliver talked enough for all of us anyway. School stories. A kid in his class who brought a snake for show and tell. A soccer goal he scored the previous weekend. Normal kid stuff. The kind of conversations that make you realize how strange it is when adults complicate things. When the food was ready, Emily set the plates down without looking directly at me. Dinner's ready. That was it. No commentary. No confrontation. Just spaghetti. We ate. Oliver asked for extra Parmesan. Jason spilled a little water, refilling glasses. At one point the dog from next door started barking, and Oliver laughed, because it sounded like a squeaky toy. Normal life. And that felt important, because for the first time in weeks, there wasn't a clock hanging over my head. No one checking the time. No one reminding me that my visit had technically expired 20 minutes ago, then 40. After Oliver finished eating, he ran back to his room to grab something he wanted to show me. That's when Jason quietly said, Dad, can we talk for a second? We stepped into the kitchen. Emily stayed at the table, but she was listening. That much was obvious. Jason leaned against the counter and rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't realize how bad that letter looked until I read it, he said. I figured. He exhaled. Emily wasn't trying to sell access to Oliver. I hope not. She just felt like you didn't respect her rules sometimes. I nodded slowly. That might be true. He looked surprised by that answer. But rules shouldn't come with invoices, I added. Jason gave a small, tired smile. Fair point. He glanced back toward the dining room, where Emily was quietly clearing plates. We've been stressed lately, he admitted. Money, house stuff, everything. I noticed the new appliances. That made him chuckle awkwardly. Yeah, maybe not the smartest timing. We stood there a moment. Then he said something that sounded a lot like the kid I raised. We shouldn't have done it like that. I appreciated hearing it. I really did. Across the room, Emily stopped stacking dishes and looked over. Not angry, just thoughtful. Finally she said, the money thing was a mistake. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was close enough for that moment. Jason nodded. We'll drop that part completely. And the timer? I asked. Emily hesitated, then shrugged slightly. Oliver can see his grandfather. Simple sentence, but it changed everything. A few minutes later, Oliver ran back into the kitchen holding a drawing. It was a crayon picture of what looked like a spaceship crashing into a mountain. "Grandpa, look." I crouched beside him. "That's incredible." Jason leaned against the counter again. Emily rinsed dishes quietly, and for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like a negotiation. It felt like family. I still kept the lawyer's letter. It's in my desk drawer even now. Not because I expect to use it again, just because it reminds me how close things came to going the wrong direction. Sometimes people don't realize what they're doing until someone finally draws a line. And that envelope, that was my line. Things didn't magically become perfect after that night. Real life rarely works like that. But something important changed. The next Saturday, I came over again. No laminated sheet. No stopwatch feeling hanging in the air. Emily opened the door and simply said, "Hey, Daniel." Not Mr. Mercer. Not "you have 2 hours." Just, "Daniel." Oliver ran up like he always did. "Grandpa." Some things never changed, and I was grateful for that. Jason grilled burgers that afternoon in the backyard. The early fall air had that crisp smell to it, the kind that makes the trees look a little brighter. Oliver kept running back and forth across the lawn, chasing the neighbor's dog through the fence. I sat on the patio chair with a cup of coffee and watched him, the way grandparents do, quietly, just noticing how fast kids grow when you're not looking. Emily came outside after a while and sat across from me. For a minute, neither of us said anything. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't realize how it looked. Her voice was calm, not defensive, just honest. I nodded. Sometimes when people write rules down, they become bigger than they meant them to be. She gave a small smile at that. "Jason told me about the lawyer." "Michael." "Right. Him." She looked toward Oliver running in the yard. "I wasn't trying to keep you away from him." "I know. And I meant that. Sometimes people make bad decisions when they feel overwhelmed. Sometimes they try to control things because they're afraid of losing control somewhere else. That doesn't make the decisions right, but it does make them human." A few weeks later, Oliver asked me something while we were building a model airplane at my kitchen table. "Grandpa, why didn't you come over for a while before?" Kids ask questions in the simplest way possible. I thought about it for a second. Then I said, "Sometimes adults have to figure things out." He nodded like that answer made perfect sense. Then he went right back to gluing the airplane wing on crooked. Kids move on faster than we do. And maybe that's a good thing. Every now and then I still think about that afternoon on the porch, the laminated sheet, the teddy bear in the bag. If I had yelled, if I had argued right there, things might have gone very differently. Instead, I went home, thought about it, and chose a calmer way to push back. Sometimes the quiet response carries the most weight. Now Oliver comes over to my place again on Saturdays sometimes. We plant tomatoes. We walk to Miller's Hardware for root beer candy. Emily still likes things structured. That part of her didn't change. But the rules are normal again. Family rules, not contracts. And the teddy bear? It's sitting on Oliver's bed now. Took him 3 weeks before he noticed it in the gift bag in my truck. He named it Captain Marshmallow. Kids are funny like that. But I'll tell you something honestly. The older I get, the more I realize family isn't about control. It's about remembering why the relationship mattered in the first place. So let me ask you something. What would you have done in that situation? Would you have argued on the porch? Or waited and answered with that envelope? So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Daniel's voice travels. Sometimes the calmest response is the one that changes everything.